After she refused to give husband her inheritance, he invited her to a family meeting. When she arrived, after she refused to hand over her inheritance, her husband suddenly invited her to a family meeting. Confused but hopeful, she showed up, dressed neatly, clutching her dignity. But the moment she stepped through the door, her smile froze. What waited inside wasn't a conversation. It was an ambush. This is the story of a woman's betrayal at the hands of those she trusted most, and the shocking twist that no one saw coming. What do you think happened next? Hello, family. Welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please, subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten, and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, because together, we are not just telling stories, we are keeping hope alive. Emily Carter stood by the window of her father's old house, watching the autumn leaves scatter across the yard. It still felt strange to call this house hers. The will had been clear. Her father left everything to her, his only child. The estate, the farmland, the savings. A lifetime of work and sacrifice, now resting on her shoulders. She pressed her palm against the cold glass, whispering softly, "I'll protect it, Dad. I promise." Behind her the sound of footsteps echoed. Richard, her husband of 6 years, walked into the room with that easy smile he always wore in public. He was handsome, sharp in his dark sweater, and his voice carried that smooth tone that had once charmed her completely. "There you are," he said, slipping his arms around her waist. "Admiring your little kingdom again?" Emily forced a smile. "Our home, Richard. Not a kingdom." Richard chuckled, kissing her cheek. "Oh, come on. Let's be honest. This place, its wealth, land, power. Your father left you something incredible. But now, sweetheart, it's our responsibility. And as the man, I should be the one managing it." There it was again. The same line he had repeated for weeks. Emily's stomach tightened. She turned in his arms, searching his eyes. "Richard, I respect you. But I'm not handing everything over. My father trusted me with this. He wanted me to protect it, not sign it away." Richard's jaw tightened for the briefest second, but then his smile returned, smooth as silk. "Emily, Emily, you know I love you. I only want what's best for us. People will talk, you know. A man letting his wife handle all the money. It's not right. It makes me look weak." Emily frowned. "Since when do you care what people say? I'm not giving up my inheritance. That's final." For a heartbeat, the room went quiet. Richard's eyes darkened, but he quickly softened them, tilting his head as if he were amused by her stubbornness. "Of course, darling." "No need to argue," he said warmly, pressing her hand to his chest. "You're just under pressure right now. I understand. Let's not fight about it." But Emily's instinct screamed. His words were sweet, but the look in his eyes was something else. Cold, calculating. Later that week, Emily visited her mother-in-law, Margaret. The older woman sat stiffly in her floral armchair, sipping tea with a sharp expression. Margaret was elegant in public, the kind of woman who commanded respect. But when the doors closed, her tongue cut like a blade. "Emily," Margaret began, her voice clipped, "I heard you're keeping all of your father's estate under your name." Emily placed her cup gently on the saucer. "Yes, Margaret. My father entrusted me with it. It's not something I can just hand over." Margaret narrowed her eyes. "Do you realize how selfish that sounds? Richard is the man of this house. He should be in charge. That's how families work. You're embarrassing him." Emily's chest tightened. She tried to keep her tone steady. "I'm not trying to embarrass anyone. I want to respect my father's wishes." Margaret leaned closer, her voice low and sharp. "A wife who disrespects her husband disrespects her whole family. People already talk about you, Emily. They say you're proud, too proud. Don't let pride destroy your marriage." Emily swallowed hard, her fingers trembling around the teacup. She wanted to answer back, but the weight of Margaret's glare held her still. When she returned home that night, Richard was waiting by the fireplace. He smiled as if nothing had happened, but his eyes flickered with something dangerous. Emily tried to shake off her mother-in-law's words, but they clung to her like smoke. That night at dinner, Richard acted as if the world was perfect. He poured her wine, asked about her day, even told a small joke that made her laugh for a moment. For anyone watching, they were the picture of a happy marriage. But Emily could see past the mask. "Richard," she said carefully, setting down her fork, "I spoke with your mother today." His knife paused mid-cut, just for a second. "Oh? And what sermon did she deliver this time?" He chuckled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "She thinks I'm selfish. She said I'm disrespecting you, that I should hand everything over." Richard sighed, dropping his utensils with a dramatic clatter. "Emily, you know how she is. My mother comes from another time. She doesn't understand women being independent. Don't let her words get under your skin." "Did you tell her about our disagreement?" Emily pressed. Richard leaned back, crossing his arms, his voice low and calm. "I don't hide things from my family. They're only worried about us." About appearances, Emily studied him, her chest tightening. Appearances or control? His eyes flashed, but he quickly smoothed his face into that practiced charm. He reached across the table, taking her hand. "Sweetheart, don't do this. Don't turn me into the enemy. I love you. Everything I do is for us." Emily withdrew her hand. The warmth of his touch felt false, rehearsed. "Then stop asking me for what isn't yours." A long silence stretched between them. Richard's jaw worked as though he wanted to snap back, but instead he gave a light laugh, shaking his head. "You're stubborn, Emily. That's one of the reasons I married you. Fine, we won't talk about it tonight." But in his eyes, she saw something else. A promise. And it wasn't a good one. Days passed and Richard grew strangely sweet. He brought her flowers, cooked her breakfast, even suggested they take a weekend trip. For a moment, Emily wondered if maybe she had been too harsh, too suspicious. Maybe he really was trying to make peace. Then came the moment that made her heart skip. One evening, Richard walked into the living room with a careful smile. He held a small envelope in his hand. "Emily, I've been thinking. We can't go on like this with all this tension. So, I arranged something." Emily looked up from her book. "Arranged what?" "A family meeting," he said smoothly. "Tomorrow evening. My mother, my sister, a few relatives. We'll all sit down together. No fighting, no accusations. Just honest conversation. I want us to be a family again." Her heart sank. A meeting? With Margaret and Claire? Those women never hid their dislike of her. She already knew what the conversation would turn into. But Richard stepped closer, kneeling beside her chair. His eyes were soft, pleading. "Please, Emily. Just come. For me. If you won't do it for yourself, do it for our marriage." She hesitated, searching his face. Was this truly an olive branch, or another trap? She remembered her father's last words to her. "Emily, the people closest to you can be the ones who hurt you the most. Don't let anyone rob you of your dignity." Still, part of her wanted to believe Richard meant well, that he was still the man she had once loved. "All right," she whispered finally. "I'll come." Richard's smile widened, though his eyes gleamed in a way that made her uneasy. He kissed her forehead. "Good. You'll see. This will fix everything." That night, Emily lay awake in bed beside him, staring into the darkness. Her gut twisted with dread, though she couldn't explain why. She wanted to hope. She wanted to believe that tomorrow would bring peace, not war. But deep down, something inside her already knew. When Richard smiled too much, When he spoke too gently, danger was never far away. And as the clock ticked closer to that family meeting, she felt her father's warning echo in her chest. What waited behind that door was not reconciliation, it was betrayal. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love you to join our community by hitting the subscribe button. Through our stories, we build hope and give future to children and women abused all over the world. Motivate us by subscribing to hitting the subscribe button and turning on your notification bell. Also let us know in the comments where you are watching us from and how this story hit home for you. Emily stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the creases of her navy blue dress. It wasn't new, but it was dignified, simple, modest, the kind of dress her father had always said made her look strong. She pinned her hair neatly, slipped on a silver necklace, and stared at her own reflection. Her stomach churned. Something about this meeting didn't sit right. But she forced herself to breathe, whispering, "Keep your head high. Don't let them break you." When she walked into the living room of Margaret's house that evening, silence fell. The air was thick, almost hostile, and it hit her the moment the door closed behind her. Richard was already seated, legs crossed, arms resting casually as if he were a judge on trial day. On his left, Margaret sat rigid, lips pressed into a thin line, eyes sharp as blades. On his right, Claire lounged in her chair, smirking faintly, as though she had been waiting for this moment all her life. Emily froze at the sight. Their semicircle arrangement didn't look like a family meeting. It looked like a tribunal. "Emily," Richard said, his voice calm, rehearsed. "Thank you for coming. We've been waiting for you." Emily forced a small smile, clutching her purse. "I thought we were going to talk. As a family." To clear misunderstandings, Claire laughed softly under her breath, and Margaret's eyes narrowed further. Richard rose slowly to his feet, clasping his hands behind his back. "Yes," he said, "that's exactly why we're here. To talk about the truth about you." Emily's brows furrowed. "The truth about me?" Richard sighed dramatically, shaking his head as if it pained him. "Emily, you've left me no choice. For months, you've refused to let me handle the inheritance. I tried to reason with you, but you've turned cold, secretive. And now—" He turned to the others, then back to her. "Now I have to face the fact that you are no longer fit to be my wife." Emily's mouth went dry. "What are you talking about?" Margaret slammed her teacup onto the table. "Don't play dumb, girl. You've shamed this family long enough, sitting on wealth while your husband looks like a beggar, refusing him his rightful place, sneaking behind his back. Do you think we don't know?" Emily's chest tightened. "Sneaking? Margaret, I've done no such thing. Everything I've done has been transparent. My father left that estate in my name. I only wanted to honor his wishes." "Honor?" Claire scoffed. "Is that what you call funneling money to some secret lover?" "Oh, Emily, don't insult our intelligence." Emily's head snapped toward her. "What?" Richard gave a solemn nod to Claire. She reached for a folder on the table, sliding out a paper, and handed it to him. Richard unfolded it carefully, like evidence in a trial, and then placed it in front of Emily. "Explain this," he said coldly. Emily stepped forward, her hands trembling as she picked up the paper. Her eyes scanned the document, her name, her bank details, and a list of transactions. At the bottom, it showed a transfer of $50,000 to a man's account, labeled Daniel Harris. Her knees weakened. This is fake," she whispered. Richard crossed his arms. "Really? Because it looks very real. A bank statement doesn't lie." Emily shook her head frantically. "No, I never made this transfer. I don't even know a Daniel Harris." "This is a forgery," Margaret sneered. "How convenient. A forged paper, What will you say next? That the whole world is conspiring against you? You think we're fools?" Tears stung Emily's eyes. She looked at Richard, desperate. "Richard, you know me. You know I'd never do this. Please, you have to believe me." Richard's expression remained stone. I used to think I knew you, Emily. But people change. I've seen the way you hide things, lock away documents, whisper over the phone. Admit it. You were planning to leave me. Emily gasped. Leave you? I've given everything to this marriage. I never... But her voice faltered as she noticed someone stepping out from the adjoining room. Her heart dropped. It was Anna. Emily blinked rapidly, confused. Anna! What are you doing here? Anna, her best friend since college, the woman who had been her bridesmaid, who had listened to her secrets late at night, who had promised to always stand by her. Anna stepped forward slowly, her arms crossed, her eyes cold. I'm here to tell the truth, Anna said. Emily's voice cracked. The truth? Anna, you know this isn't real. Tell them I'd never ... But Anna interrupted sharply. Emily, I'm sorry, but I can't lie for you. I've seen you grow distant. I've heard your phone calls. I know about the transfers. Emily staggered back as if struck. Anna, no. How could you say that? You're supposed to be my friend. Richard raised a hand, silencing Emily. He spoke to the room like a man delivering judgment. You see? Even her closest friend confirms it. Emily is not the woman she pretends to be. She's selfish, deceitful, and disloyal. She dishonors me, this family, and the memory of her father. Emily's tears fell freely now. She clutched the forged paper, her chest heaving. This isn't true. None of this is true. You're twisting everything. Can't you see? This is a setup. Margaret stood, her finger pointed like a dagger. Enough, Emily! You're not the victim here. You've shamed us long enough. You don't belong in this family anymore. A murmur rose in the back of the room. For the first time, Emily noticed that other people were present. Neighbors, distant relatives, invited under the pretense of witnesses. Their eyes were fixed on her with judgment, some whispering, others shaking their heads in disgust. Emily's face burned with humiliation. She wanted to scream, to fight, to rip apart the lies, but her voice felt trapped in her throat. Then Richard delivered the final blow. He stepped forward, his voice booming with authority. Emily Carter, I will no longer call you my wife. Tonight, in front of this family and these witnesses, I declare that I will divorce you. You are unworthy of my name, unworthy of this family, and unworthy of the trust you were given. The words crashed into her like a hammer. Divorce. Public. Humiliating. Final. The room buzzed with whispers. Some people looked away in pity, but most nodded in agreement, convinced by the carefully staged performance. Emily's knees nearly buckled. She clutched her purse for balance, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. Richard, how could you do this to me? She whispered. Richard leaned close, his voice low enough only for her to hear. You should have given me the inheritance, Emily. You brought this on yourself. Her heart shattered. As she stood alone in that cold room, the walls closing in, her dignity stripped away in front of strangers and those she had once called family, Emily realized the cruel truth. She had been ambushed. Betrayed not only by her husband but by everyone she had trusted. And the woman who had once walked with confidence now felt the ground crumble beneath her feet. But deep inside, buried beneath the pain and humiliation, a spark still burned. A whisper in her heart, faint but steady. This isn't the end. They think they've broken you, but they haven't. Emily lifted her head slowly, her tears still falling, but her eyes sharper than before. She didn't know how or when, but one thing was certain. The war had only just begun. The days after the so-called family meeting blurred together like a nightmare Emily couldn't wake from. Everywhere she went, whispers followed. At the grocery store, two women near the fruit aisle leaned close, speaking just loud enough for her to hear. Poor Richard, one said. Imagine being betrayed like that by your own wife. The other gasped. and with another man too. I heard she was sending him money behind Richard's back. Shameless Emily clutched her basket tighter, her face burning. She wanted to scream at them, to tell them it was a lie. But when she opened her mouth, her throat went dry, and all she could do was walk away, her dignity trailing behind her like dust. Friends she had known for years stopped answering her calls. Invitations vanished. Even at church, people shifted away when she entered a pew. The judgment in their eyes cut deeper than any blade. One evening, after enduring another round of whispers and cold stares, Emily drove past the house she and Richard had shared. The sight froze her blood. Through the window she saw a woman, tall, blonde, elegant, walking through her living room in a silk robe. Sophie. Emily's hands gripped the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white. Sophie laughed as she set a glass of wine on the table. A moment later, Richard appeared beside her, slipping his arm around her waist as if he had never known another wife. Emily's heart split in two. The home she had built, the memories she had cherished, all replaced in an instant. And it didn't stop there. Within weeks, she received notice that her inheritance was frozen. Richard had filed legal claims, presenting the forged bank statements as evidence of her fraudulent behavior. Until the courts sorted it out, she couldn't touch a cent of her father's estate. Emily sat at her small kitchen table in a rented apartment across town, staring at the stack of papers. Her hands trembled as she traced the lines of Richard's accusations. Fraud, adultery, mismanagement of estate, words designed to destroy her completely. For the first time, despair truly sank its claws into her. She spent nights curled up on the couch, staring into the darkness, asking herself the same question over and over. Why me? How could the man I loved turn into my worst enemy? But even in her weakest hours, something inside refused to die. The betrayal had broken her heart, shattered her reputation, stolen her peace. Yet her spirit, though battered, still clung to life. One rainy evening, as she sorted through a box of her father's old belongings, Emily stumbled across an envelope. Yellowed with age, sealed with wax, the handwriting on the front read, "For Emily. To be opened when you feel lost." Her fingers trembled as she broke the seal and unfolded the letter. Her father's words leapt off the page as though he were standing beside her. "My dearest daughter, the world will tell you to trust easily. But remember, greed wears many masks, even the mask of love. Never hand over what you've worked for, especially to those who would use sweet words to chain you. If the time ever comes when you feel alone, know this. Strength runs in your blood. You are mine, and you are stronger than they will ever understand." Emily pressed the letter to her chest, tears spilling down her cheeks. For the first time in weeks, she felt something other than despair. She felt clarity. She whispered into the silence, "I won't let them win, Dad. Not like this." The next morning, Emily dressed not in sorrow, but in determination. Her eyes were still swollen from crying, but her steps carried new purpose. She knew she couldn't fight Richard and his family openly. Not yet. They had money, influence, lies on their side. She needed the truth, so she sought help. Quietly, discreetly. In a modest office on the edge of town, she met James Turner, a private investigator with a reputation for being sharp but discreet. He was a man in his 50s, with greying hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Emily sat across from him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "I don't know who else to trust," she admitted. "They've taken everything from me. My husband, his family, even my best friend. They've all turned against me. I need proof. Proof that I'm not the liar they say I am." James studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "If what you're saying is true, Mrs. Carter, then the truth is out there. And I'll find it." Over the next several weeks, James worked quietly, feeding Emily pieces of information that cut through her despair like shards of glass. First came the photographs, grainy but clear enough, of Richard and Sophie dining together long before the inheritance dispute began. Not just dinners, but weekends away. Hotels. Vacations paid for with money funneled from joint accounts. Then came the recordings. Whispered phone calls between Richard and Anna, plotting together. Anna's voice sharp and bitter, saying, "She's too naive to see it coming. Just push her harder. The more she resists, the more selfish she looks." Emily listened to the recording 3 times, each word stabbing her like a knife. The friend she had trusted with her deepest fears had not only betrayed her, but actively helped destroy her. Finally, James placed a thick folder on her table. "This is what you've been waiting for." Proof of the forged bank statements. They were manufactured with inside help at the bank, arranged by Richard and Claire. Every transaction, every signature, it's all fabricated. With this, the truth can't be denied. Emily flipped through the folder slowly, her hands steady now. For the first time since the ambush, her heart didn't race with fear. It beat with resolve. She closed the folder and looked at James. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned. "This is enough to destroy him." James leaned back in his chair. "It is, but the question is, what do you want to do with it? Take it straight to court? Go to the police?" Emily shook her head. "No, not yet. If I rush, they'll twist it, just like they twisted everything else. I want the world to see them for who they really are. I want their masks ripped off in front of everyone." James gave a slow smile. "Revenge served cold. I like it." That night, Emily sat alone with her father's letter spread on the table beside James's folder of evidence. She read the letter again, her father's warning echoing louder now. Greed wears many masks, even the mask of love. She touched the ink with her fingertips and whispered, "You were right, Dad. But I'll make this right. I'll take everything they tried to steal from me. And I'll make sure they pay for every lie, every betrayal." Her despair had not vanished. It lingered like a scar. But it no longer controlled her. She had proof. She had clarity. And most of all, she had patience. The Emily who had walked blindly into that ambush was gone. In her place stood a woman who had lost everything, except the fire in her soul. And as she turned off the light that night, her lips curled into the faintest, most dangerous smile. Richard and his allies thought they had won, but their greatest mistake was believing she would stay broken. Emily Carter was broken, but unbowed. And soon, the reckoning would begin. It was a night built for triumph, or so Richard believed. The ballroom glittered under chandeliers, filled with laughter, clinking glasses and music. Guests swirled in gowns and tuxedos, congratulating Richard on his new beginning. At the center of it all, he stood tall with Sophie at his side, her hand looped proudly through his arm. She shimmered in silver satin, smiling like she had already won the world. Margaret and Claire hovered nearby, smug with satisfaction, whispering to anyone who would listen about how justice had been served, how their family had rid itself of a disgrace named Emily. And Anna, dressed in emerald green, glowed with self-importance, walking confidently among Richard's business partners as though she were part of the family now. Everywhere Emily's name was mentioned, it was with mockery or disdain. Poor Richard, betrayed but brave. Emily was never fit for him anyway. Sophie is far more suitable, classy, devoted. The music swelled. Glasses were raised. The master of ceremonies stepped forward, preparing to toast the upcoming marriage. And then the room fell silent, because at the top of the grand staircase, Emily Carter appeared. She stood straight and composed, dressed in a gown of deep midnight blue that shimmered with quiet power. Her hair was pulled back, her face radiant but calm. She descended the stairs slowly, each step echoing like a drumbeat. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Is that Emily?" She came. Richard froze, his glass halfway to his lips. Sophie stiffened at his side, her smile cracking. Margaret's eyes widened in shock, and Claire muttered a curse under her breath, but Emily didn't flinch. She walked with dignity across the polished floor until she reached the center of the ballroom. The music stopped altogether. All eyes were on her. "Good evening," she said, her voice steady, cutting through the silence. "I wasn't invited, but I thought it only fair to congratulate Richard on his new life." A ripple of uneasy laughter spread across the room. Richard forced a smirk, setting his glass aside. "Emily, what a surprise. To what do we owe the pleasure?" Emily tilted her head slightly, her eyes never leaving his. "To the truth." She lifted her hand, and from the corner of the room, James Turner, the private investigator, stepped forward carrying a small black case. Gasps filled the air as he placed it on the stage and opened it, revealing stacks of files, photographs, and a laptop. Emily stepped onto the stage, her presence commanding the room. "For months I was called unfaithful, greedy, a liar, cast out by those who claimed to love me. Tonight I return, not for revenge, but for justice, and I want everyone here to hear the truth." The crowd shifted uneasily. Richard laughed nervously. "This is absurd. She's unstable. Someone escort her out." But Emily held up a hand, her voice rising. "Sit down, Richard. You've had your say. Now it's mine." Her eyes swept the crowd. "First, let me introduce you to Sophie." She gestured toward the trembling woman beside Richard. "Not just Richard's fiancée, but his mistress, long before my father passed away. Here are the photographs of their weekend getaways, paid for with money siphoned from our accounts while I was still his wife." She clicked the laptop. On the large projector screen behind her, images flickered. Richard and Sophie holding hands at a seaside resort, kissing in a hotel lobby, lounging in a private villa. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Sophie's face drained of color. Emily continued, her voice cutting like steel. "And what of Anna? My best friend, the woman I trusted with my secrets. Here she is, caught on recording, plotting with Richard to destroy me. Listen carefully." She pressed play. Anna's voice filled the ballroom. "She's too naive to see it coming. Just push her harder. The more she resists, the more selfish she looks." Heads turned sharply toward Anna, who stood frozen, her face ashen. She opened her mouth to protest, but the whispers drowned her. She betrayed her own friend. How disgusting. Emily's gaze shifted toward Margaret and Claire. "And these two pillars of family honor? They didn't just cheer Richard on, they helped him forge documents, bank statements, transfers that never existed, all so they could strip me of my father's estate. But lies," she paused, her voice hardening, "leave trails. And the evidence is right here." James handed her another file, which she opened for all to see. Copies of emails, signatures, and bank logs filled the screen, each one proving the forgeries. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Business partners whispered angrily. Guests shook their heads. Some women glared at Margaret and Claire with open contempt. Emily raised her chin, her voice unwavering. "For months I was humiliated, cast aside, and mocked. But truth has a way of breaking through darkness. And tonight, the truth stands before you." Richard, pale with rage, slammed his fist onto the table. "This means nothing. You're a liar. None of this will hold up in court." Emily's lips curled into the faintest smile. "Funny you should mention court." At her signal, the double doors swung open. Uniformed police officers strode in, their badges gleaming under the chandeliers. Gasps rose from the crowd. "Richard Carter," the lead officer announced. "You are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement." The ballroom froze. Richard's face drained of blood. "What? This is a mistake. I'm Richard Carter. You can't do this." But the officers closed in, snapping handcuffs around his wrists. Sophie staggered backward, her perfect image crumbling, while Margaret screamed in protest. Fraud? Conspiracy? No, this can't— The officer silenced her with a stern look. Margaret Carter, Claire Carter, you will both be summoned for questioning. Evidence links you to document forgery. The whispers turned into open condemnation. Business partners stormed out, muttering about ruined reputations. Richard's future in-laws pulled Sophie away, sneering in disgust at the chaos they had been dragged into. Anna, trembling, tried to slip out the side door, but people pointed, whispering her betrayal. The empire they had built on lies collapsed in a single evening, and at the center of it all stood Emily, calm, composed, radiant. When the chaos subsided, she stepped down from the stage. People parted to let her through. Some nodded in quiet respect. Others whispered apologies. But Emily didn't need their approval. She walked with dignity, her head high, the faintest smile on her lips. At the door, she paused and turned slightly, her voice soft but clear enough to carry. Let this be a reminder. Greed and betrayal may win for a season, but integrity wins in the end. And with that, Emily walked out into the night, free at last, not just with her inheritance, but with her dignity restored. The chandeliers still glittered, the music still lingered in the air, but for everyone left behind, one truth was undeniable. The woman they thought they had broken was the one who had won.